Thank you all so much for giving us part of your Friday evening. I hope that it will be well worth your time and attention. I am so personally delighted to welcome our three panelists today to the Sagan National Colloquium that emphasizes the contributions of Ohio Wesleyan alumni to broader society and to the world. And for those who were here on Monday, you heard Ezra Vogel, the class of 1950, talk about his path to figuring out his place in the world. And I just think that it delights me so much to follow up the class of 1950 with some of our most recent and talented and generous alumni who are here to talk to you about what it's like to be at the very start of figuring out where the world's going to bring you. And I am so delighted to see so many Ohio Wesleyan students at this event, because these three alumni are really representative, in my mind, of the real strengths of Ohio Wesleyan alumni. They are curious, they're engaged, they're willing to take risks and willing to listen to the forces that drive them and motivate them, rather than being completely swayed by expectations that others put on them. And I hope that through the example that they give you tonight of their paths, that you can also find ways to be open to the adventures that await you over the next couple of years here at Ohio Wesleyan. I'm going to hand this over to Professor Essler from the Politics and Government Department, who's going to be the MC for the event, and I will chat again about upcoming Sagan events at the end of the evening.
Well, hello, and thank you for coming out on a Friday night. I do believe this is an all-time first for Ohio Wesleyan University to have an intellectual event on a Friday evening. But I also know you guys don't actually start socializing until 10, 11, 12. So this will be perfect. Get a little intellectual nurturing and then on your way. So tonight we have three esteemed recent graduates. At the far end we have Emma Drongowski, Memme Onwudiwe, and Carolyn Thompson, all relatively recent graduates of Ohio Wesleyan, all who have taken a slightly different path, but are here because they're well on their way to making a difference in the world. And so I thought I would say no more about this and turn it over to Emma first, and have each one of them maybe go down the line and say why they came to Wesleyan, what they were thinking when they came here, what they were going to do, and what they are looking for out of Wesleyan, how that might have changed over their careers here, and how they ended up where they are now.
That's a lot of questions to answer. Okay. Hi, all. I'm Emma Drongowski. I'm currently in Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up a little all over, but was coming to Ohio Wesleyan from Franklin, Tennessee. I was looking at small liberal arts schools and applied to a lot that looked really similar, a lot of ones in Ohio and all over the country. And to Ohio Wesleyan, first of all, I really wanted to be in Ohio. I'm a total political junkie, and to be here in Ohio during an election year, I started school here in 2012, seemed like a lot of fun. I also really, really loved the fact that Politics and Government Department was a very practical major. There's a lot of classes about sort of the practicality of politics and government rather than the theory. And here at Ohio Wesleyan, I did a lot of different things. I was in Kappa Alpha Theta, I did WCSA, mock convention. What else am I answering? Anything else?
What did you want to do?
Oh, what I wanted to do. I definitely thought I was going into politics full time when I came here. And that's really what I did in school too. I actually took a semester off of Ohio Wesleyan to run a political campaign in Cincinnati. Ultimately did not end up in politics. Am I going into what I do now, or? Okay, great. So I work now at a foundation. It's called Greenlight Fund. We're a national organization, and what's categorized as a venture philanthropy fund. We're in 8 cities around the country, but I'm in Cincinnati, and what we do is we conduct community needs assessments to understand where gaps in services exist in the nonprofit sector. We then scout the country for high-performing nonprofit solutions that use data to inform their work, and then we import them to cities. So for example, I did a whole selection cycle where we identified that folks who are coming back from incarceration have a really hard time finding jobs. So we imported an organization to Cincinnati from Oakland, California, that specifically helps people returning from incarceration to find employment. So it's a little bit about what I do, but definitely happy to talk more about it.
Awesome. Hey, my name's Memme Onwudiwe. I'm currently based in Silicon Valley. I heard about Ohio Wesleyan actually from a call from the track coach. That was like my first hearing about the school. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, Centerville. And so I got here. What really drew me here was the soccer team. My freshman year, we won the national championship. We were very good. We're still very good. And so I got here. I quit track automatically, focused on soccer. And actually, it's ironic that Professor Essler is asking me, my path, because he was my advisor. And when I came here, I told him, I want to do pre-law. You know how it is. People are like, oh, you argue a lot. You should be a lawyer. You don't know anything else about yourself. So you're like, yeah, I'll do that. And he suggested, actually, that I don't major in pre-law. He said, you can go to law school with any kind of major. Pre-law is pretty restrictive. If you find out junior year you don't want to be a lawyer, then you're kind of screwed, for lack of a better word. So I majored in international studies and French. I did a double major. Basically just kind of things that I was interested in as opposed to, just focusing on law. And I did end up going to law school. I took a gap year afterwards and went to Harvard Law. And actually ended up I didn't take the bar. So after graduating this last May, while I was in school, in a similar kind of fashion to Essler's idea of following your passion rather than just kind of doing what you think you should do, I ended up helping start a startup that uses AI to pull out data from contracts. And so after graduation, went straight to Silicon Valley, and I'm working with a startup there now. And yeah, that's as far as the questions you asked. I think that's kind of it.
Good start.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carrie. I graduated in 2014. I came to Ohio Wesleyan because I thought that I wanted to be a history teacher, and Ohio Wesleyan has a good teaching program, as you know. But I'm now in law school after also pursuing a career in publishing. So if you take anything away from what I'm saying, you don't need to know what you want to do right now, or even in 5 years. You can keep changing your mind. It's totally fine. But I started out taking some classes in education, realized that probably wasn't what I wanted to do, and instead, like Meme said, started just taking any class that interested me, and I ended up accidentally having 3 majors because I was just really taking a lot of classes, really enjoying it. And then I was working for Dr. Spall at the Historian. I don't know if that's still happening, but and so I was editing for him and thought I should probably go into publishing. And so I moved to New York City, and I did that for 4 years. And while I was there, I, on the side, taught English as a second language to new Americans. And that was 2016 into 2017. And so I was working with a population that had a lot of questions that, as an English teacher, I was not equipped to answer in any way. So I started thinking, well, I love to read and I love to write and research, and maybe I could go to law school and then actually be able to help people answer those questions. So I just started last year. I'm in my second year now, and I love it. It was absolutely the right choice. But when I was at OWU, I met Professor Essler today, even though he's the pre-law advisor, because I had no idea I wanted to be a lawyer, but it's absolutely where I should be. So take your time. You'll figure it out.
Well, thank you. Is there anything you would give by way of advice about what you might have done differently here when you came in? You're all on the road to success, it sounds like. What adjustments did you make here, or what do you regret that you might have done that you didn't? Or no regrets?
Yeah, it's good to live with no regrets, but I think that, well, one thing, I guess it's not a regret because I did it, but I think everyone should study abroad. I don't care like what your major is and blah, 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 I can't do it. You should go study abroad. Because when else can you just leave the country, live in a whole different place and do whatever? I mean, I would honestly say my regret is that I broke my ankle a few months before I studied abroad. So like my first month in Paris, I was on a peg leg. And I was also on a peg leg for the moot court nationals. But so I didn't get to enjoy it as much as I otherwise would. And I also lived with my aunt there, which was a great thing because I saved money, but it's also cool just to kind of just be out there when you're out there, just because I feel like there's a lot of opportunities, like, when you're in school, like, people literally are just around you to better you. Like, they're just like, what do you want to learn? That never happens again. No one's like, hey, do you want to learn Arabic? I'll spend my whole day teaching you Arabic. No one's ever going to do that again, So, like, if there's skills that you want, this is, like, the time to go and get them. And then you just go abroad. Just find a way to make it happen, because I highly suggest that. It's so much fun. And you learn a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say, try things that you're scared to try, and do things that you usually would say no to. And don't take that the wrong way, but I meant that, like, there were some, like, speakers who would come to campus or events that would be held on campus, and I was like, I don't know, that doesn't seem like a thing I usually want to do, and went, and always those were the things that I loved the most. Both experiences on campus, off campus. I think push yourself to do things that you're scared of, and that it's okay to fail at it. I think I did a lot of things at Ohio Wesleyan that I already knew I loved and I knew I was already kind of good at, and it's really important to hone those skills, but I also wish there are some things that I went a little outside of my comfort zone. It is the safest space to fail. The stakes feel very high when you're in it, but actually it's okay to fail at Ohio Wesleyan. It's a very, like, academically, socially, in a club, try something new, because the stakes to fail are pretty low, and it's so worth it when you experience something new that you didn't think you were going to.
I absolutely agree with all of that, and I would say I did this, so it's not a regret, but it's something I'm really glad I did. Like I said, I took any class that I thought looked interesting to me, and I think that's something that you don't really ever get a chance to do again. Like, I took a botany class, which I'm so glad that I did, because I love plants, and I have an apartment full of plants, and I'm so glad that I took that class, but there's no way I could have taken that now or later in life. And there's a class, I think, on Jane Austen that I never got to take that I wish I had, so I kind of wish I could come back and just, like, do it all again and take more. But yeah, don't worry about, like, I went into, I worked for a, like, major corporate company with a Latin American studies degree, and it was fine. So don't worry about like, getting something that will get you the job that you want, because really you need to learn how to write, and you need to learn how to interact with people and think critically, and you can do that with almost any major. That's my experience.
So to follow up on something Memme said, he took a year off, and it has become so institutionalized now that there's actually a term for it, gap year, and we used to just say, I'm taking a year off, living in my parents' basement. How about Emma, Carolyn, did you take some time off? Right?
I did. Yeah, I did a service year, so I did something similar to AmeriCorps. I did a faith-based one, so I did a Jewish service year. I moved to Chicago and did community organizing for a year. So I made $605 a month, and for a year, yeah. It was a tight year. But it was also a really, really phenomenal year. I think that there's so many things that happen that year right after you graduate that feel so scary and so big. And there's so many times where I had friends who went right into the next thing that they were doing, whether that was law school or medical school or another grad school or just work. And there's so many things that were hard because you're going from living with all of your best friends to having a very, like, safe and structured life to having a lot of freedom to make decisions. And there's a lot of really hard things that come with that, and it's really easy to attribute the things that you're doing to that hardness and then just want to bail and do something else. So I think taking a year and, like, having a year to do something was really, really beneficial for me. It's a tough year that year after you graduate, and so doing something that as sort of a confined time, as like a year, or just taking time off to recharge, was, I think, the best thing that I could have done.
I just started working. That sounds great, though.
Well, it sounds like, but Memme, you did basically nothing.
Yeah. I'll say that there's a lot of pressure to do stuff right after. Like, for me, my friend Andrew Paik, and he's a Fiji, in fraternity with me. We even ran for like school president, vice president together. Like we were very tight. And he was a year older than me. He went straight to Harvard Law, which I didn't even know was an option. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that. But like he went straight, you know? So I was just like, okay, I cannot take the LSAT while I think I was telling Alexis about this beforehand, but I'm not gonna like take the LSAT while I'm in law school, while I'm in college, you know, because like the GPA is also important. So yeah, I did, at the time, I think it was the first time, but now it's like an institutionalized thing. There's like the Barron Fellowship. And so I went for that. So over the summer after graduation, I was in Nigeria doing some research. And then after that summer, I just came back and I just studied for the LSAT. I took it like a 9-to-5 job for like 2 months because if you think about it, like the amount of money you're saving on scholarships, you make it back kind of if you look at kind of hourly from how much your salary is from studying. So studying was my job. That's how I convinced my mom at least. And then after that, it was effectively nothing. I was tutoring French like once a week, and then I had a job up here twice a week that was like a student affairs intern. But the cool thing about applying to law school is when people ask you what you're doing, you can just say applying to law school, and they're like, oh yeah. So, yeah, but no, I think there's definitely different paths. Like Paik, by the time I started law school, it was his last year and my first year, and like we were still tight. We lived on the same floor, it was very nice, but you know, like there's different paths, so just do whatever makes the most sense for you, because you know, you work on your own time.
But there's something to be said for relaxing a little bit in this go-go killer world that we live in. I just came across a quote from President Dwight Eisenhower, of all people, who said that everybody should take at least an hour every day to do nothing, just to think about crap. And I endorse that position, and you need to take some time. Now, when you're in school here, you need to study hard, kids, but once you get out, you know, take a breath, think about things. So I've got a question about networking, which I have mixed feelings about. All these three people have sparkling personalities, and I'm sure it comes naturally to them. But what do you have to say about that? How important is that? Even if you're not the most outgoing person in the world, like me, what do you recommend for, I mean, how important is that as opposed to being, you know, strong in grades and having a work background? Where would you place that in the list of important things to succeed?
So I'll speak a little bit about the law and then also my prior career, but for the law, networking is very important. That's kind of how everyone finds their jobs, and grades are extremely important, but then also knowing people and having people that can speak up for you makes a big difference. When I worked in publishing, I was surprised by how much of networking was just having friends that worked for other companies. I think like it doesn't have to be as scary as like walking around with a little at an event with a napkin and a cocktail, like trying to talk to strangers. Like I think that kind of networking works for some people, but for me it was just about you know, meeting people my own age that would, like through time, move up in the company and then, you know, be able to give you tips about if you're applying for that company or something like that. So I don't think it has to be as intimidating as sometimes it seems like it is. Just think about like, you know, having friends in the industry that you're working in. Because when you work in a company, you'll make a lot of friends with the people that are your age. And then something people say about our generation a lot, which we're all emblematic of, is that then everyone will leave and then go to other jobs and nobody works at the same company their whole career anymore. So when I started at my company, I had a whole bunch of friends that worked there, and then they all left for other companies, and so then all of a sudden I knew people all over New York at different publishing houses. So sometimes it's as easy as that. So just, you know, be nice and be willing to help people, and it kind of falls into place.
Yeah, no, I think that touches on it really well. I think it's just about being like a good person and everything. And then also, you know, there's times when academics are really important, but then there's times when like networking's way more important. So like when I got to Harvard, like everyone's like reading all the time, and it's like that's great, but like we all know you guys are smart. Like at the end of the day, like we've got to bring other skills to the table, and there's people there who like couldn't get the law firms they wanted and stuff, and it's because they kind of, the only lever they would push is kind of reading more, but it's, you gotta be personable, you gotta, like there's a lot of other skills out there to have apart from just, you know, doing that. And I think that being able to connect with people and talking with people is like a real skill. And I think going to a small school where you kind of know everybody, I think it hones it to some extent. So I think you guys already have that. You just got to know that it's a real skill and not just something that's kind of negligible.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that there's something about coming to Ohio Wesleyan or coming to a small school. So many of my friends went to University of Tennessee, and I'm seeing now all of their pictures of getting married, and they're all just still friends with the exact same people that they went to high school. We all went to high school together. And so I think part of it is just expanding your network of people you meet and meeting different kinds of people. I would also say, have an elevator pitch, and that is just a 30-second, who you are and what you want to do. And this does not have to be, it's made out to be a really scary thing, but anytime you're talking, you can probably identify, this is who I am, I'm generally from here, and this is what I want to do, and have that down, because if you are really clear about, who you are, what you want to do, or even if it's just, yep, I just graduated school, I'm really exploring my options in A, B, and C because I eventually want to be doing this. Or even if you don't eventually know what you want to be doing, I'm really exploring my options and trying to figure out what I want to do. Using confidently, that kind of thing, makes a really big impression on people. And so having that 30-second to a minute just sort of pitch is, I think, really, really helpful in whatever field you're going into. But I would definitely agree that I think networking is so field specific, because I know in some companies, I have a lot of friends who work for P&G, and happy hours after work, that is when a lot of professional networking happens. In nonprofits, not so much.
Well, all three of you at a very young age are accomplished for your age. But like everybody else, I know you face challenges along the way. And why don't you say a few words maybe about challenges without getting too personal, but mainly how you overcame challenges and realized that this is not the end of the line and you need to persevere? Mamie looks anxious.
Yeah, okay, I can go. Yeah, I think one big challenge is that, sometimes you're in a position where you can almost sleepwalk into something. So at law school, basically everyone goes to big law, which is big law firms, because you get paid a crazy amount of money, and it's a lot of work too, but it's kind of they can recruit, they just make, it's so simple to do that if you don't pay attention, you're just there after 3 years, oh wait, how'd that happen? I'm an associate at a law firm, so, and I really didn't want to be at a law firm, and I was still at one last summer. You should definitely do it over the summer. I digress, just because it's a lot of fun in summers, not in real life, but over summers it's fun. But what I'm getting at is, though, in that situation, it was really simple just to kind of follow that. And because, you go to a new place, everyone's talking about this, Wachtell, Lipton, and Dawes, the best law firm ever. Everyone wants to go there. You've never heard of these last names before, but now you know the top 5 and the top 10, and but that stuff, you didn't even know it before you got there, and it wasn't even important to you before you got there, clicking with this judge or clicking with that judge. So you can enter a place where it's all of a sudden there's all these rules of what's the most important thing, the best thing to do. But just remember, you didn't even know that a week ago. So how crazy important is that? Just take a step back and look at where you are and what your opportunities are, and then kind of find how you can best navigate that to get where you actually want to go. Because at the end of the day, you know that, and you kind of walked into that place. It shouldn't shape you.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges I had is that I left college with a really vague notion of that I wanted to do good in the world, and there's a lot of different ways that can look. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to do a service year to just generally help people. And I was expecting to go into that year and be placed at a social service organization that would then make me choose something, right? Whether that would be immigration or homelessness or women's issues, right? There's all these different paths, and I was okay, that'll force me. And then I ended up being placed as a community organizer where I didn't pick. And then I'm now at an organization where I'm a generalist, where every year I find a new thing. And I think is an ongoing challenge, in that being a generalist, it's hard to know what your next step is, right? Because there's only so many things that are sort of general, and the idea that I just want to do good in the world is not going to sustain me forever in my next career path. So I think that's probably an ongoing thing that I'm experiencing, is narrowing down where my skills can make an impact. And I think that's also probably one of the harder things after graduating is is really owning what my skills actually are, not what I want them to be, and what my really, you know, like honing in on those skills and working on to make them great and figuring out what positions utilize those skills the best, and just as honestly being aware and self-aware about what my strengths aren't and working to improve those, but also not putting myself in a position where I'm constantly doing things that I'm just not naturally gifted at. Yeah.
Don't want to confess?
No, I was about to give an example. But
I would say, I'm trying to think, I think when I was sort of hitting a point where I realized that I didn't want to work in publishing forever and I didn't know what to do because I still needed to pay my rent, and I think that not being afraid to get involved in the community and do volunteer work, I think, is really important. I mean, I did some tutoring while I was here, and that's how I figured out that I didn't want to be a teacher. And then when I was working in New York and teaching ESL, that's how I figured out I wanted to be a lawyer. So like a lot of my career decisions have come through experiences. And so I would just, you know, seek that out, be willing to try anything, because you honestly, you don't know, like what Emma was saying, you don't really know what you're good at until you have given something a chance. So, and sometimes the only way to get a chance at something is to volunteer. So just get involved, and if you don't know, you'll figure it out.
What about life-work balance? You guys are young, maybe you haven't figured this one out yet. Hell, I haven't figured it out yet. But how do you think about that? Maybe Carolyn, especially relevant for her since she's in the middle of law school, which is notorious for involving a lot of work. But what do you guys do for fun? What do you carve out, and do you integrate that in with your work? Well,
I think one piece of advice that I got going into law school was to find something, and I haven't necessarily followed this, but I have intentions of following it, but was to, if there's something that you love to do, don't give it up when you're in law school. And like when I was here, I was in the Outsiders, and I always loved to sing, and so I've been thinking that it'd be great to do that again, and just like have something where I can go and not think about law and just to sing. And so imagine that I did that and had a work-life balance, and that's my advice.
Yeah, I would say that somebody gave me this advice, and I try really hard, is that knowing that any job, but especially first jobs or early jobs, are not going to provide everything you want. I think that our generation, and the cutoff might be me, so it might be different generation, but in general, people our age are saying, like, I had this perception that, like, you're going to get a job, and it's going to be one of those freaking amazing jobs in the Bay that like has those really cool slides and gives you snacks, and like you're gonna meet all your best friends and pays a lot of money, and you're gonna live this like really cool life, and like that job doesn't exist except for like 10 people in the Bay Area. And so knowing that like your job isn't gonna be everything for you, right? Like it might pay really great, and you might have really great friends, but you might not love the work. And that's okay, because then you can be involved in things outside of work that do sort of fill your bucket. Or you like really love the work and it's like good soul-filling work, but it pays nothing. Or like it has really, really good benefits and pays a lot, or you know, whatever it is. There's like all these different categories of things, and I think part of it is that no job is going to provide you all of those things, and being aware of that and finding ways to fill your bucket and reach those things outside of work is, I think, really important. So for me, like I said, like I'm a total political junkie. I thought I was gonna go into politics, but like the pace of political campaigns is just not sustainable for me. Like working 20-hour days for 6 months of the year and then being unemployed was not good for my mental health. And so I instead like took a job that is much more stable. It's nonprofit, it's 9 to 5, but a lot of my free time is spent working on campaigns. So knowing that your job doesn't need to be everything and fulfill everything for you is, I think, very important for me in finding that balance.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that I just graduated from law school in May, so I can talk about that a little bit too. And yeah, I think it was really good advice about kind of keep doing the stuff you want to do, and just realize like it's almost back to the networking thing, but like everyone likes having fun, you know, like so even in like a super serious environment, you know, like, I lived in the dorms in law school, and like I'd just bring out FIFA, and we just all start playing FIFA, you know, because like people like playing video games, you know, and like people, like even though they're like reading all the time, when they see an opportunity to do something, you know, people generally, you know, want to do something. So I would say like if you kind of exude that, like it will come, you know, if you build it, they will come, you know. So I think definitely do what, you know, you enjoy, but then realize other people probably enjoy it too, and if they're not doing it, just because they think that they can, but like you totally can, you know. So like I think be that, you know, because that's the kind of thing that I think will be is good at the end of the day. But you know, there's definitely gonna be times where you have to work more than you have fun, and that's also life. So don't think that you're gonna have work-life balance. That's like fake millennials. It is, yeah, no, it's not real. So yeah. No, I'm sorry, it's true.
What's he know? He's so young. Maybe this is more a question for Emma, but it seems to me that one of the things that gives anxiety to having a liberal arts degree, you know, unless you're going to be an accountant or in some degrees going to be a lawyer, you've got jobs waiting for you. But a lot of politics and government and other social science and humanities people don't have an immediate profession when they get out of school, and I know that caused a lot of anxiety. A lot of our students go to Washington looking for that life that Emma was at first interested in, and they've got to work at it. You know, they've got to get their foot in the door and move on up. I don't know how much of that you experienced, since you're such a talented person. You maybe didn't go through so much of that, but did you go through that when you got out of here, and sort of where am I going to land, and you had to sort of hustle?
Totally. So like I said, I took a semester off to do a campaign, and I think that was a really, really wonderful experience for anybody who's interested in any kind of like social change or social movements. I recommend working on like one campaign cycle. It is a lot of work, but it is a lot of fun, and I think I learned more professional skills in that like 6 months working on a campaign than I learned in a lot of other experiences. So I will say it's a phenomenal experience, but I think the anxiety that I experienced was and still is very real, and I think for me what was really helpful is, one, finding mentors, and I think for me that looks like finding mentors in a few different fields and mentors that serve a few different purposes. And my advice for mentors also is be someone worth mentoring. And I don't mean like you inherently, but like if you have questions, come prepared. When you're trying to meet with somebody, the worst thing, because now I'm getting these, is like people reaching out like, oh, I just want to grab coffee. And we just sit and stare at each other. I'm like, okay, like, what do you want to talk about? You know, like have set questions of things that you want to explore when you're grabbing coffee with somebody, because the large majority of people are interested in coaching, in mentoring, in giving advice, or just talking about their industry, but have specific questions or specific things you want to get out of the conversation. And I think that is something that really, really helped me to sort of narrow in on, first of all, what I want to do, but also like what skills I bring to the table. People here at OWU, I had so many conversations before I left, like, really, what do you think my skill sets are? What can I bring to that? Because when you have a liberal arts education, I was like, there's a lot of jobs I could have that could make me happy and make me feel fulfilled. So what is it that I actually like doing? I think one of the best things like to do is have different summer experiences, do really different experiences, try new things. One of my summers here at Ohio Wesleyan, I worked at a tech company that taught coding. I cannot code anything, but I did like logistics and operations for them, and I learned so much about the kind of place I like to work. I really loved the kind of team they had and the kind of office setup and all these different things. And so sometimes it's not exactly what industry or what job, but it's like, what do you like doing when you go to work every day? Was really helpful for me in identifying and sort of narrowing in the kind of job that I wanted to look at.
I would say, sort of related, but I wouldn't undervalue your like clubs and activities and that kind of experience, because through like my sorority and I led a spring break trip, and I did a WCSA and a lot of random student groups. And through those sorts of experiences, I got a lot of experiences that I could talk about on interviews for jobs and like show leadership skills. And while it was happening, I thought like, oh my gosh, like CAP is taking up so much of my time. But that sort of thing really helped me when I actually had a job and like had to work with people or manage people, because I had already done that, I felt a lot more confident and I could talk about that in interviews. So I would say like, definitely get involved, get leadership positions. That's all really valuable too.
Yeah, I'd also just say like, you know, be open to opportunity, even if it's not exactly what you're looking for. So like, I mean, the startup I work with, I was just studying for case interviews for like consulting McKinsey stuff. And this dude just walked in because he knew the person I was studying with. And he's like, oh, can I help you study? I'm like, sure. And then he helps me study, and then he gives me his number. And then later he's like, hey, you know, I'm starting a startup. You know, we're using AI and contracts. Are you interested? And I know nothing about AI. I know nothing about anything. But I'm like, yeah, you know, I'll check it out. Got coffee, you know, joined this team member number 5. And now we have like 30 people in Silicon Valley and millions of dollars, you know? And that's just because I said yes. I think always lead with yes. And then if it's bad, then say no later, right? But like be in there until like the point where, you know, when you actually have to make a decision. But if you can kind of be part of something a little bit and you just kind of see how it goes, I think definitely do that, you know, be open. You know, like, I was on one of the founding fathers of Fiji too, and that's because, like, you know, a bunch of people were like, you know, let's do this. And I'm like, yeah. You know, and ended up being one of the best decisions, you know, I ever made there too. So I think even if you want to, even if you think you know what you want to do, if there's an opportunity that seems interesting, I think don't just close the door because you're so sure about what you want. You know, I think at least humor it, right? Humor stuff, basically.
So what about the future? Do you ever think about the future, or are you just too young for that? I mean, when you envision the future, how do you see yourself in it? What do you want to achieve personally and non-personally, socially?
I would have been terrified of this question for like the last 20 years or so of my life, but now I can confidently say I want to be an immigration lawyer, and I'm really excited about it.
Nice.
How nice for you. So good.
Yeah. I mean, I think down the line, long term, I definitely want to be like probably Nigeria or Ghana, kind of, you know, doing some work there to some capacity, either in, you know, business or government if things ever get cleaned up. But yeah, I see that broadly. But you know, like I said before, you know, if something crazy comes up, like I'll take it. So we'll see. That's a non-answer, in case you're curious.
Yeah, so something I've been thinking a lot about is how I want to make change, whether that be like really micro or really macro. And so thinking about like when I did community organizing, there's something so satisfying, right? About like you're like working with people who are literally just working to make their block better, right? They're literally just organizing to make the square block where they live a better place to live, whether that's to get a stop sign or to get a better school, right? So like that is the most micro kind of change. And it is sometimes very, very satisfying, because if you get somebody to recognize how they can make an influence in the world, like that is a really, really satisfying experience. And now I'm working in a place where I am talking all about impact. How can we scale organizations to make a bigger and broader impact, right? So I think those are the two questions that I grapple with when I think about my future, is which kind of change do I really want to go all in on? I don't have an answer to that, but I think those are the two biggest questions that I think about when I'm trying to decide what kind of career I want to have ahead of me.
None of you said make a lot of money and donate it back to Ohio Wesleyan.
That's assumed, right?
I thought that was our agreement. Well, questions from the audience? Do you want to start unless you all have some closing arguments you want to make?
And please do wait for me to bring the microphones so that everybody can hear.
So all of you are affiliated. Can we go from right to left of who and why you joined your organization, and then also how that affects you now in the workplace?
Yeah, I was a member of Kappa Alpha Theta. I had zero plans to join any Greek organization. I'm from Tennessee. It's a very, very intense and different experience in the South. I had no desire to do that. When I came to Ohio Wesleyan, though, like every single person that I looked up to in like clubs, classes, were all Greek, and so I think that's what caused me to sort of want to get involved. We had some like really tough real life problems in my sorority. Like we were put on probation when I was here at some point, and that like got very real very quickly. And so I think it taught me a lot about responsibility. It taught me a lot about managing my time too. It takes a lot of time. And also, I mean, I made so many wonderful friends. I can't say that it, specifically for me, I've had specific Greek experiences post-graduation other than I volunteer sometimes. But I think that's also probably pretty specific to my industry. Like nonprofit sector is just not such a thing, but I have heard of other people who have made connections through that. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I was Fiji. I did not have any plans on doing anything Greek. Honestly, at the time I got there, I was on the soccer team. I think maybe 2 soccer players are Greek. And then Fiji came and we're all like, we're gonna, all join this. And so we did, and it was literally all my friends decided to join, and there was no one who said I couldn't because we weren't applying to anybody. It was just us raising our hands. So I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. And so it was a lot of fun, and honestly, I think it was very, very like, a very formative experience, because like when we think about a startup, from going from just 5 people at the table, we got like 30 people in an office. It's the same thing of like, us sitting in the econ building, for our chapter meetings when there's just like a bunch of people saying that we're a fraternity, to actually, but seriously, to like actually building it and have it be something real where, I'm sitting and looking at Fijis today, so I think that kind of being able to create something and seeing the process of making something real, I think was definitely very formative. And then also like, I had no thoughts of going to Harvard Law School until literally like this dude in my fraternity who had the exact same GPA as me said he was about to go there, and I'm like, wait, what? And so like, just like having, someone who's a mentor and someone who's your friend, like, and watching them succeed and just like, asking them questions and following those footsteps, I think very formative. And even like my first year of law school, it was Andrew's final year in my first year, and we lived on the same floor in the dorms and saw each other every day. And like, he definitely helped me out a lot. And people were weirded out that 2 people from Ohio Wesleyan were living on the same floor at like HLS. But no, it was, I think it was a great question. And I think, to this day, it's still pretty formative.
Well, and I'll just say that Memme made the most of it. He won the National Mr. Fiji of the Year award.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty impressive. Now, what is that? Some question. Secret code.
So I was a Kappa Kappa Gamma, like Emma May. Like Emma Meme, I also didn't want to go Greek. I had a big book of colleges, and I highlighted everything I liked about each school in green, everything I didn't like in red, and really type A. And all the Greek stuff is like all red, and I didn't want to do it. But I came here, and I met a lot of awesome people that were Greek, and I'm really glad that I ended up going through. I think like the 2 biggest things I think helped me were, 1, leadership. In the real world, no one tells you how to run a meeting, but I had done that many times in Kappa. So when I was in the workplace and had to like run meetings, I was like, well, this is way easier than chapter. Like, I can do this. It's fine. And no one uses Robert's rules or anything. And then also my job, and I think like for networking, it can be really helpful. My job transferred me to Indianapolis after 3 years in New York City. I didn't know anyone in Indianapolis, but like that was a way that I could make friends and meet people. So that's something that happens in real life. You might get sent to Indiana, and it'll be good to know some Kappas.
I will also say, looking at Courtney, who's one of my very dear friends, who right after graduation, who now works at OU, but right after graduation, she went and worked at Theta National Headquarters. Just talking with her, I know that was a very formative experience, and that it served as a really, really great way for her to learn professional skills too. So I think that, I had an amazing experience that I think can also be replicated in other clubs and organizations. The type of leadership experiences that there's a lot of unique and amazing things about Greek life, but there's also a lot of the things and skills that you learn there that are just as applicable in other clubs and organizations on campus.
I'm going to jump in for just a second and add that, like Emma, I went to college in the South as well, where Greek life was also something very different than it is at OU. And when I was just beginning as a faculty member here, it was students like these three that helped convince me of all of the really advantageous, wonderful aspects of Greek life in these small schools. So the leadership echoes out. Other questions?
Like 1/18 of the way. Okay, I kind of just volunteered to ask a question because nobody else would. What was your favorite thing that happened at OU when you were here? Or like favorite thing you did?
I'm just going to make a hard plug for mock convention.
That's a hard plug. You were right, yeah.
Wow, I'm so glad for so much enthusiasm. Doesn't even look like I need to.
Not even planted.
Whew. Yes. Mock convention. I was lucky enough to do it my senior year. It's a thing that like feels when somebody on campus who is as enthusiastic as you, I sincerely appreciate your enthusiasm, approaches you and is like, you should really do this. It's this cool thing. Do it. It's a really like, it's like, when you hear it, it's like a Friday night and half of a Saturday, and that feels like such a huge time commitment, but it was really one of my favorite experiences at Ohio Wesleyan. For those who haven't heard of it, we simulate a nominating convention here at Ohio Wesleyan. So, like, we had 40 students who represented Texas, and they dressed up like Texans, and they debated a platform, or for the national office, and then we nominated somebody that we thought should be the president and vice presidential candidate. So we nominated John Kasich for president and Nikki Haley for vice president. Didn't work out, but other candidates for vice president were Jesus Christ, Rock Jones, John Cena, a few other people. But it is really such a phenomenal experience if you're a political, there's a lot of people who will be like drafted from all over campus to be involved in it. But I would also recommend getting involved in the planning process because it was really such a phenomenal experience. But clearly there are students on campus who are really excited about it. So you should talk to them.
And you only get to do it once.
Exactly. It happens once every 4 years. So this year will be the only year that you'll get a chance to do it.
You get one shot at this.
Yeah.
We've been doing this since 1896.
Yep.
So it's historic. You'll regret it if you don't do it, kids.
Stephen Colbert won my year.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. My favorite thing I did, I enjoyed a lot about Ohio Wesleyan. Okay, there's a lot of fun stuff that happened. My favorite though might have to be my senior year. The Fijis, we led it was an interfraternal FIFA tournament where I gotta reminisce. I'm back in the Benez room. It's not every day, but we literally it was a tournament within Fiji of 25 people just to find our 4. Each fraternity did a FIFA tournament to find their 4 people. And then we did the 4 best from each fraternity playing in Elliott to get down to the semis. And then when we reached the semis, we rented out the movie theater, okay? We opened up everyone to come to the movie theater. We got access to like where the projector is and set up a TV there. So 2 people are playing on the TV in the projector room. It's being projected onto the movie theater. And we had announcers who were actually announcing, interfraternal announcers. So like if it's Fiji versus Sidkai, you'd have one Sidkai and one Fiji. Oh, Sidkai's gone.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. I digress. I'm showing my age here. Sorry, but yeah, it was it was a very fun event, and I very much enjoyed it. Yeah, I digress.
just as cool as a FIFA. I highly endorse taking a travel learning course if you haven't done that yet. That is so not a thing you can do in the real world ever. Like, you cannot travel for the amount that you would pay for a travel learning course. Like, absolutely not. And just like get the experience. And that's something that like I still talk about, and people can't believe that I got to like, go and see castles with my professor. And anyway, it was amazing. Do as many as you can.
Yes. Hello. I was just wondering, do you guys have any advice for students currently going through the law school application process right now?
My advice, my advice is first ask multiple people, because I've seen people do it completely different ways. You know, there's no right answer. But for me, like the two biggest things are your GPA and the LSAT. And my perspective is you only have 4 years to do the GPA part. So I'm very much like focus on your GPA when you're here, take a gap year, do the LSAT when it's time for the LSAT. But like while you're here, I wouldn't try to, I mean, and there's lots of people who go straight through, and I don't want to, you know, that's another path. But for me personally, I like the focus of just doing your GPA now, and then afterwards, only after you graduate, begin studying and thinking about the LSAT. So that's my suggestion.
I would agree with that too. And I think just from being a law student, the students that are happier and more successful in law school are students who either worked in between or took a little bit more time. I think it can be easy to burn out if you go straight through. Some people do it, and it kind of depends on the person, but there's definitely no harm in taking some time.
Yeah, and I guess you know, while there's a weird gap, I would suggest the Power Score books. You know, as far as like a specific book to use. You know, but I would also suggest getting multiple different sources, right? So like one book might say for logic games, you know, this is the way to do this particular game, but another book might say another way. And if you read this one, you might not understand it, but if you read this one, you might be, oh, this makes sense, and maybe it helps you understand why that one makes sense, right? So like I think you're kind of looking at diverse, you know, studying materials, because there's different ways to do it, and you know, just find the one that's best for you.
But doesn't that sometimes just confuse you?
It could, you know.
I've seriously had a few students do Kaplan and Power School.
That's exactly what I
did. They come
did.
back and they say, man, you know, there's two different philosophies here, and I'm trying to...
I literally did Kaplan and Power School, and yeah, no, I liked it.
Power School is really popular now, and I kind of endorse that one. And the other one is that Khan Academy, not only for law school, but if you're going to graduate school. That's free service. It's a wonderful organization, and you can get lots of good material there for nothing.
I just took a lot of practice tests. I don't know what Power School is. So that's an option too.
So like a lot of you are kind of in very different places, but when you were like fresh out of graduation, like what kind of like called you to do kind of what you did for like that first year or two? I know you maybe talked about just like getting ready for, like taking the LSAT and things like that, but like overall. And then also as a secondary question for Carrie, very specifically, what kind of like drew you to be like to teach ESL while you're in New York, and how did you get into that kind of like volunteering stuff?
Sure. So wait, what was the first part of your question?
Just like what kind of drew you to do what you did for the first year or two after that?
Gotcha. So I wanted to work in publishing because I love to read and write and edit, and it never occurred to me that those are all skills you need as a lawyer too. So that's how I ended up going and working for a publishing company. In terms of teaching ESL, selfishly, I wanted to practice my Spanish, and I was like looking for an opportunity to like meet Spanish speakers and talk with them. And this was a little bit before immigration was like such a hot button issue. So it was like early 2015, 2016. And then I, like, through doing that, like, yes, got to practice Spanish, but also got to hear a lot of what's really difficult about being in this country as a new American. And that was just something that I hadn't been exposed to before. And so yeah, it's a really valuable experience.
Well, just to follow up, so what made the transition out of something that you had been into for years to this new area while you were actually doing what you thought you wanted to do for years?
Sorry, can you rephrase?
I mean, what was key to the transition out of something that you had committed to for a long time into this whole new area?
So out of publishing and into
into
law.
law.
I mean, I think, so sometimes when you're trying to make a decision about what you want to do, like, you don't know what's going to happen with the world. And like, when I graduated in 2014, like I said, immigration wasn't a big deal, and there wasn't a lot of stuff that was happening in it. So it's not like I could have even decided to become an immigration lawyer then. It wasn't even on my radar. So I guess if you, like, inspiration is kind of something that you can't really time. So I wouldn't rush it, if that makes sense. But I think I just sort of got to a point where, and this is something that you'll all go through too, where going to OWU, I had a ton of friends who, like Emma and Memme, are doing things that really change the world, and I felt like I wasn't, and I felt like I was working really hard on making books that people weren't buying or reading, and I wanted to do something meaningful, and I felt like teaching ESL and like getting to know my students was really meaningful, but I also knew that that they needed so much more than English. They needed a lot more advice and help that I couldn't provide. So I wanted to devote a lot more time to that, but my job was taking a lot more of my time too, so I kind of got to this point where those things were really in tension. I needed to sort of choose one path or the other. Does that answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I already told you guys a little bit about what I did after, but I guess just to talk a little bit about the Barron Fellowship, which is what I did after graduation when I went to Nigeria. It's a fellowship that supports OWU students who want to do postgraduate scholarships. So I was going for the Rhodes Scholarship. I want to do international development at Oxford. And so if you want to do, like, you know, the Rhodes or like, you know, I forget the name, but there's a bunch of different things you can do. Like
Marshall.
Exactly,
Fulbright.
Marshall. Fulbright, that's the one I was thinking of, thank you. Like the Fulbright or stuff like that. OWU has lots of resources where you can apply for a grant, and even though you've graduated, they'll pay for you to go somewhere just to get an experience that will help your application for that scholarship. And it's the cool thing in small schools is, like, this school wants you to succeed, you know, because it makes the school successful too, right? So they will, like, it's not every day someone's going to be willing to invest in you just for your own success. And so I think definitely look for opportunities like that and take that.
I had no idea what I wanted to do before graduation, which is why I was like, sure, let's do a service year. For me, it was absolutely like a putting off making a decision. And I was very, very happy that I did it. So I was not very like intentional going into it, other than I knew that I wanted to do something that made the world a better place, and so I was like, and I'll say that if you're looking at doing AmeriCorps or City Year or Teach for America or any of those services, first of all, I will say you should do them. I think they're really amazing experiences. I would also say talk to alumni of those programs. They are all very, very different programs. Not all service programs are created equal, and you'll have very different experiences in each of them. And I think a lot of them are positive, but I think a lot of them aren't. And I think you should be very aware of what you're getting yourself into before you sign up for it. So there's a million like groups on social media sites, or you can ask them, like, can I talk to a few alumni, and really try and get sort of a real picture of what that experience is like. Don't go in sort of underestimating how hard a service year is going to be. But for me, it was a really, really excellent year.
So just to let me underscore this from my perspective as a person entering as decrepitude, you know, your 20s are a wonderful time after you graduate. And I would not be in a great hurry to establish some line of career. And sort of following up what Emma was saying is, you know, take the time to check things out, you know, make mistakes. You don't have to be a big success. You know, if you hit a nice career stride when you hit 30, you know, well, you're going to be working 35 years at that job as opposed to starting at 25 and you're working 40 years. You know, really the difference isn't that great in the long run, and there's lots of things that you can do in your 20s that are fun and exciting and get you prepared to settle down, you know. So I wouldn't be in a big hurry to rush out of here and, you know, make your mark on the world. There's time to do it.
I actually wanted to echo those points too. As soon as they started talking, I was like, yes. This is also echoes something that Sahar Khan said at the end of her Q&A at her talk about terrorism and Pakistan and the U.S. relationships, is when she was asked to say, what advice would you give current Ohio Wesleyan students, she said, take the time to read things you enjoy. You never get this kind of time again. She now has 2 kids under the age of 5. There is not a time in your life when you are going to be as unencumbered and free to just go take a year and do something, or go to a foreign country for several months, or take a stab at moving to New York City for a crazy job. Like, this is the moment where you have the fluidity and the freedom and so much fewer things tying you down than you will even 4 or 5, 6 years later. And so don't be afraid of embracing the unknown when you're free to do it.
But by the same token, you know, don't be afraid to settle down.
True.
At that point either.
Yeah. If you find your thing.
Much as I love my 20s, and I ripped them up, you know, the greatest thing by far that ever happened to me was, and is, my 2 kids. So don't diminish that either if that's something in your life. But you got time to do that. That's all we're saying here.
Yeah, straight to grad school from undergrad. Don't regret it, but could have had a little more.
But there's another sound piece of advice. Never leave college if you don't have to.
Never leave college. We can arrange to keep you here.
Man, this question feels so much more of an icebreaker, I guess, than what we talked about. I'm going to ask a question. I couldn't answer this question. What was your favorite class at OWU? I couldn't even pick for like this semester, so I'm sorry in advance.
Looking at all of you.
Well, also because 3 of my professors are in the room with me right now. I, as the only person on here who did not go to law school, who isn't going to law school, constitutional law, I don't even know if he still teaches at Lauthen, constitutional law, I mean, it was kicked my ass, that class, and it was such a good class. And then I would also say Dr. Beiser's class on democracy and its critics. I think that class was very, very fundamental in shaping how I think about democracy and civic engagement.
Nice. A lot of my professors are here too, almost all of them. But I think I'm gonna have to go with moot court, with if you call it a class, because it's really just a fun experience, but you get credit. So honestly, it's a competition, right? You know, like it's 2-on-2, you know, you go out, go to regionals. I bombed out my senior year at regionals, but my junior year, we somehow made it to nationals and like broke the school record. It was me and my partners, both our first time ever doing it. We were just doing it, once again, because Andrew Paik was doing it. But yeah, so, and that was a really cool experience. I never took any law classes while I was here, but that was like my engagement with law while I was a student here. And you did literally the whole like semester, there's just one case. You just have to learn that case, and then you go to regionals and argue, and then you can go to nationals. We went to Phoenix. Which was a lot of fun because Esther's from Phoenix, so he took us to his family, which was great. I'm kind of being circuitous, but I think it's a really good opportunity because it's a class that's actually has like real engagement and like real competition, and you know it's fun.
I did not take a bad class here, so I would just say, like, take as many as you can. And once again, I'm not just saying this, but take a travel learning course. They're so great.
The bar is opening.
No. This is the easiest kind of audience to ask to learn to get comfortable asking questions in. No one does.
So kind of you guys, So you guys have kind of seen as undergrads going from OWU to kind of going as graduates. So kind of how have you seen that, I guess, connection between the two? Where like, we only know the OWU connection from our end, but you guys maybe are able to touch on the other end of it. So do you guys have any tips, any pointers, kind of anything to look for? I know you guys have kind of touched on networking and stuff, but kind of anything past that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I'd just say, don't be afraid to reach out to people. OWU's small enough that, people are going to be excited to see other OWU people. That Ezra Vogel guy who came last time, he teaches at Harvard. And so, one day, Paik and I went and visited him, and we're just like, okay, we're students at Harvard. We go to OWU. And he's like, what? And we just, he took us to his house, and we ate, Chinese food. And he studies a bunch of Chinese stuff. That's what. But anyway, I think don't be afraid to reach out. Even, Austin over there, he came to some conference at Harvard and hit me up. And I'm like, yeah, I'm down. And, we got tacos. And, I'd show them around Harvard and stuff, So I think just reach out because it's a small school. So, the fact that 2 people went to Ohio Wesleyan is definitely enough of something to start something.
Yeah, I would say ask people here on campus if you're starting to be interested in something. Nancy, I know, is such a good resource for me when I was looking at getting involved in politics. She's like, oh, you should talk to this person who graduated 3 years ahead of you, so you don't know them or whatever. But that I think people on campus, professors, staff are really good resources in connecting you to more recent alum. And then it's really easy to connect with them on social media and just send them a message or whatever. Yeah, I would also say Ohio Wesleyan, I was intimidated going and looking at jobs where the other people applying were from way better known schools and more prestigious universities. And I'll say that just because you went to a prestigious university doesn't mean you're a more prestigious candidate. That sometimes if you have Ohio Wesleyan versus Harvard or whatever it might be, you have to come into the room a little bit more confident in saying, here's how my experiences and skills have shaped me to be a good candidate. But I haven't had that as a major stumbling block. I think the other thing is that often when you're at big schools that have a lot of name recognition, it's really easy to be one of a lot of people. Whereas here, I know so many professors, I had so many more opportunities to be in leadership positions that really I didn't understand was so unique and rare for Ohio Wesleyan. Being president of something does actually mean something to employers, or saying, I was president and I did this, is impressive because they're looking at all recent grads. And so everyone is talking about the same years of experience. And so I would say don't let that intimidate you, that to walk into a space and to be able to confidently say how your experiences have made you a qualified candidate. I definitely know I experienced that, walking into rooms, I was like, all these people went to Ivies, how am I qualified? And know that you are, and that Ohio Wesleyan has academically very well prepared you and extracurricularly very much prepared you.
Well, remember, about half the students at Harvard and Yale got there because their parents paid off.
I'm actually going to use this question to springboard into a plug for the next series of Sagan events, because it seems to draw very well not only on your question, but also on the answers that all 3 just gave. I just ran back to get my flyer because I don't have it memorized. The week after break, we are experimenting by co-hosting a series of events that we're calling Connection Week. It's the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday leading up to homecoming. And also, football team's doing really, really well. Plan on going to homecoming. But the first one, they're all going to be in these rooms from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., walk-in, walk-out basis, kind of open house. The first one is going to be with representatives of the OWU connection. And so you're going to be able to talk to people about travel learning classes, about theory to practice, about whatever SIPs are now, small grants. You're going to be able to talk to some of the Merrick mentors and get advice on how to do applications for those. And you're going to be able to talk about externships and all of these kinds of things that the OWU connection helps connect you to. On the Wednesday, we're going to have the career connection featured, and you can go and have open house meetings and conversations with people about how to identify the kinds of skills that Emma was talking about, how to self-reflect on where your strengths are, how to figure out how to explain what this education and what your growth has given you that you can now bring into finding your first couple of steps. So we're going to have people talking about resumes, talking about ways to make positive steps while you're here at OWU towards your first stages of your career. And then finally, on the Friday of homecoming weekend, there's going to be a whole bunch of alumni back on campus, and so we're having the alumni connection, where we're working with alumni affairs to let any and all of you just kind of walk into the room and meet alumni who are doing all sorts of different things across the state, across the country, across many different careers. And so it's going to be a whole week of open houses, and really seriously a great way to start to explore some of these very things that Emma and Memme and Carrie have talked about mattering so much to them, both here at OWU and subsequently. So,
and I was going to follow up from what they said, but even more appropriate from what you just said. Wesleyan, I think, is doing a much better job than we ever did in the past at making connections, to use a term that's overused, but that Wiser and what's the other one, the Handshake, those are great resources to connect you to alums. And I am here to tell you that Ohio Wesleyan alums, love this place, and they love our students. And I mean, I was always too self-conscious to reach out back in the day. I got over it, by the way. But you should force through it if you feel that way, because the payoffs to making these connections are great. And if you think you're being a burden on some of these alums, almost never is the case. They're flattered that you're reaching out, and they usually want to give back. So I would heavily endorse that, and the ability to do that here now is so much easier than it used to be. Did you want to add something? The only person who did it.
I think you said it all, and I think that I was always afraid to reach out to people because I was like, no one wants to hear from like some college student who doesn't know anything. But nobody gets anywhere without having had a mentor themselves. So a lot of people want to like have someone that they can share their knowledge with, and I think just like thinking about it that way makes it a little bit easier.
And if you also think about it, like if somebody from your high school reached out and was like, hey, could you talk to me a little bit about Ohio Wesleyan? You'd be like, oh yeah, for sure, of course I will. And like it's the exact same way. Like there's really not that big of a difference. Like people love this place. They want to talk to students and like really talk to you on the phone for a few minutes or grabbing coffee with you. Most people can fit it into their schedules, and it'll be a really great way for you to meet people, and it'll make them reminisce. You'll probably have to bear with a little bit of them reminiscing, but.
I think that here in a minute we're going to break up and let people come talk to you individually when it's not kind of full pressure, but I guess I wanted to give you guys all three a chance for final thoughts.
I'll just say it one more time. Different majors have different requirements, and study abroad if you can. You're gonna be in a different country for like 5 months, experiencing all these different things, taking classes on whatever. It's just such a let me tell you something. I'm gonna tell a quick story. I'm gonna do it. So a friend of mine, he was a SIGEP, which is still here, and he he studied abroad in the Czech Republic. And so me and my friend, we were in Paris and Madrid. We were doing a Euro trip around Europe, and we went to the Czech Republic to meet up with Eric. When we get there, it turns out he, who played football here, not a QB, but was wearing an OWU football jacket in the airport, got picked up by a guy who runs the Prague Lions, which is their American football team, and was their starting QB and captain for his study abroad. He was being shipped off to games in Slovakia, like while he's studying abroad. And he lives there now. After graduation, went back to Czech Republic. Eric Wall, he plays for the Prague Lions. And like it's amazing. Just try it out, because it's not gonna be another time you can just go to another country for 4 months and everything's taken care of. So go for it.
For such a small school, it is amazing the people you'll run into all around the world that know Wesleyan. I was in a pissy little town in Italy one time, and I had an Ohio Wesleyan t-shirt on, and some guy with broken Italian, I hope he wasn't a student here, but he had a relative who was here, and it was like, oh, Ohio Wesleyan, and, you know, and I thought, my God, you know, and it's happened many other times around here, so be proud. We're actually well-known and well-respected, so that's another thing you can use as leverage.
I was doing prep work for my most recent travel learning class, and I'm on a riverboat on the Danube outside of Vienna. And someone's sitting down, we're speaking, see, I'm reading an English book, so they speak English to me. It's like, so what do you do? I was like, oh, you know, why are you here? I was like, oh, I'm getting ready to teach a class, a college class. I said, oh, where do you teach? I was like, oh, a small school in Ohio. I said, oh, which one? I said, Ohio Wesleyan. And this woman turns around, who I wasn't even talking to, goes, oh, woo! And alums. It's just, it happens all over the world.
I don't want to steal Memme's, but I also endorse studying abroad. And also, don't be afraid to go somewhere totally random. Like, I know I had friends that did the Salamanca program, and I think it's great, but I went to Peru randomly. You can just pick anywhere and make it happen, and I got a lot of support from Ohio Wesleyan. Just like, that was my dream, and it happened, and it was great. So pick somewhere and do it. This is like your big chance to do something like that.
So my advice is maybe not. My advice is think about how many people that you know who are less competent than you, and they all go out throughout the world and have jobs and have families and do amazing things. You're more competent than most people you know. You're smarter than most people you know. You have to go out through the world and think that you actually know what you're doing. Imposter syndrome is so real. I experience it all the time. But know that you are qualified, you are capable, you can do that. When you realize that all the people who run the world are still just themselves figuring it out, it's both terrifying and wonderful to realize that you can make a lot of things happen by walking into a place, having a lot of confidence, and I think also owning when you make a mistake, but then moving forward. But really, you can do it. You can do it. So.
It's good, close.
Excellent. Thank you all for coming out here and giving up part of your Friday night. Thank you to all three of our panelists for making the trek back home to Owu.